Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cloud on Air. I'm Evan Jones, and with me,
I'm Julian.
and we're going to be talking to you on one of these webinars that you're going to see every Tuesday. We're excited to kick off today's about getting the most out of your data. And this is from Data to Insights with Google Cloud Platform. This is ultimately going to be a teaser or a preview of a longer course that you can take either on demand or in an in-person session. So hopefully we'll get you excited enough today with some pretty cool demos, 3 cool demos that we're going to show you a little bit later. You can ask a question inside of the chat box, and we have live Googlers standing by. So if you have a question on the demos or a question about the course materials or anything like that, just type in your questions. Even though we're talking, you'll have live Googlers answering those for you as well. So why don't you say we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. So first off, a little bit about ourselves. Who are these folks here in front of you? So you might have seen me from some previous webinars. I'm a technical curriculum developer. And for Google Cloud, my specialty is big data and machine learning. So topics like BigQuery or some of the machine learning APIs that you can access right now. I like building super fun courses out of them and then recording them live on here for you to take. But sometimes a lot of people accuse me of saying, well, not necessarily might have the latest and greatest of what there is out in the field. So with me, I brought an amazing cohort. When we have.
So hi, my name is Julian Philippe, and I'm a solutions architect here at Google Cloud. My role is to work with customers and help them plan for the migration of their workloads to GCP. I've lived in various parts of the world, in Reunion Island, France, and Australia, as evidenced here in a photo, mingling with the locals. And more recently, I've moved to San Francisco 6 years ago, which is where I'm based now.
Cool.
How about we get started?
Yeah, let's do it, shall we?
Let's do this.
You definitely get points for the more creative photos. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So you learn a little bit about us, and we're going to overview what generally we're going to cover right now. So as I mentioned, this is going to be big data and machine learning focused, and this is going to be like a very high-level overview in the slides, and then some deeper dives into the demos that we're going to do. So it's going to be 3 things. You might have already heard of BigQuery. We're going to go into a quick demo of that. It's the ad hoc querying processing platform. And we have Cloud Dataprep. And Julian's going to walk you through a pretty cool demo if you're ever interested in how to clean up dirty data in a more automated and GUI fashion. And last but not least, we're going to end with some machine learning concepts. So this is accessing machine learning APIs in a friendly way through a data lab notebook that we're going to cover. And all 3 of these demos and all the content behind them is covered in much more greater detail in the course. So hopefully this will get you jazzed and excited to launch and take that Coursera course fully. What do you say we get started?
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
All right, so today companies face a lot of pain points. They have to deal with a huge amount of structured data and unstructured data. Unfortunately, they don't always have the technical expertise and the infrastructure to process that data. And then also, that data tends to come in different forms with varying levels of quality, and that makes it difficult for to extract value from that data. So as a result, it's that those insights tend to be locked up in opaque data, and it's also difficult to share it amongst stakeholders. So this is why companies tend to miss out on huge opportunities to expand their businesses. And this is where GoKappa platform comes in. GoKappa platform offers a fully managed turnkey system to visually explore, clean, and prepare structured data and unstructured data to analyze at scale with minimal technical expertise. As Evan just mentioned, we're going to run you through a few demos of some of the products that are available on our platform and to show you how easy they are to operate.
All right. So let's get this kind of webinar in a little bit broader context. So today, hopefully you're coming here and you might have used like SQL, or if you're not familiar with how to kind of ask questions of your data, you're in the right place. We're going to demo from the SQL side in BigQuery, to the data cleansing side in Dataprep, to the machine learning side in some of the data lab notebooks that we're going to be working with. So this is just generally to get you primed and ready to potentially jump in and take that Coursera course tomorrow. And then later on there, if you wanted to say, well, I really, really enjoy these concepts and I'm really enthused to learn more about machine learning, what other courses do you have on data engineering or application infrastructure or Kubernetes and container deployment? Those for the step 3, you can take whatever tracks that you want available on demand through our Coursera courses there or in-person training as well. So this is just the start of your journey, honestly. So hopefully at the end of this, what you'll get is just a little bit of appreciation for what some of the tools and technologies on Google Cloud Platform can do, but it's by no means the end. So just to kind of kick off this in general context, a lot of folks ask, well, all right, there's a lot of tools and products on the Google Cloud Platform. What does Google do really well? As you can see here from the Forrester chart, Google is a leader in what I would say is some of the current offerings for big data and machine learning specifically. So when folks are asking like, all right, well, I want to get more well-versed in the data space. Where should I start? So oftentimes they'll jump into the Google Cloud Platform and then use a tool like BigQuery, which, as you're going to see, you don't need to set up your own server infrastructure. You don't need to worry about the scalability, adding more hardware over time. So you have like a Black Friday sale, and you're worried about whether or not the massive amounts of data that's coming into your warehouse, if you're going to have a ton more servers to query that type of data. So it's serverless and a little bit scalable to petabytes of data. But a lot of times we get faced with this blank stare. So you log into the Google Cloud Platform, and it's exactly that. It's a platform of many different products and services. And a lot of folks don't necessarily know which is the best place to start. So for this particular webinar, we're going to focus in on what you see directly there in the middle, which is going to be your data and analytics. So the reason why it's called Google Cloud Platform, cloud because it's scalable, you don't need to worry about the servers and infrastructure behind the scenes, and platform, as you see that bottom bar, offers many different products and services that you can build on top of. That's why it's called the platform. And then obviously we can't cover all of those topics today in just the short amount of time that we have. So me being completely biased and really enjoying the data and ML ones, we're going to jump into those 6 icons that you see there. First BigQuery, then data prep, and then through Data Lab, we're going to be accessing those 3 machine learning APIs on the right. So as we covered, we're going to take a look at BigQuery, data prep, and then the machine learning APIs, but it's best done through real demos. So let's go ahead and jump right in. BigQuery itself answers the question of, how do I do a data analysis? I'm a business intelligence professional. How do I do data analysis at scale in a meaningful way without having to manage servers or infrastructure? And it deals with a lot of the general problems that you might see in the day-to-day world. So for example, how do I get tons of data in, petabytes of data in? Well, you can import it into BigQuery. How do I transform that data in a repeatable way? Well, you can do that either through SQL in BigQuery, or as Julian's going to show you, inside of Cloud Dataprep with some pretty fun wranglers. How do you deal with storage? How do you deal with the analysis of the data? And ultimately, how do you visualize the end of those results? This is the day in and day out life of a data analyst or a business intelligence professional. And it's been my life for the last 10 years, getting folks excited about SQL, but also in the last couple of years, a lot more tools that make data analysis and processing and visualization a lot easier and arguably a lot more fun too. So that said, it's demo time. Let's jump into the first demo, which is going to be using BigQuery to process over 10 billion rows, about 500 gigabytes, and we can test it to see how fast it does. So first and foremost, I'm going to jump into Google BigQuery. And again, as part of the course, we're going to go through a lot of the different bells and whistles of the UI and where you can find things here. But first and foremost, all you have to know is that you can write SQL, which is the structured query language that you ask questions of your data, into this box here. So you write SQL queries and you get answers back. So in the simplest case, how I normally would teach the course is you say, all right, well, give me, which is just a fancy way of saying select, 5 and 5. And as you can see, if you run the query, you get 10 as a result back there. And you're saying, okay, wow, well, SQL and BigQuery is nothing more than a really big calculator. And yeah, well, that's true. Extrapolate this. Say you didn't have 5 and 5, but you had an order, like the quantity times the order. But say you wanted to actually pull data from a particular table. So I have this pre-canned query they're going to pull open here. And what you're looking at is a SQL query that selects the language, the article title, and the total number of views that each of the pages in Wikipedia has. And not only does it do that, but it filters for each of the different pages where the title, you see the wildcard operator, has Google somewhere in the name. So if you know Wikipedia, you know that there's tons and tons and tons of pages out there, millions if not billions of different pages. So let's see how long it actually will take to process all of these. So we're going to run this query. And in addition to pulling all those records, it's doing these aggregations behind the scenes. And then it's doing this wildcard operation to see the titles where it's matching Google. And then it's showing the pages that have the most views first. Now, the most interesting thing, yeah, the results are down here. But the thing about what makes BigQuery is if you look here on the right, you'll see that in about 11 or 12 seconds, it processed through 416 gigabytes of data. So massive amounts of data. You just put your data inside of BigQuery and then run these ad hoc queries on top of it without having to worry about spinning up database servers or managing software or anything like that behind the scenes. Interesting, it's also an exploration tool. So if you wanted to see, well, what are the other public data sets that are available out there inside of BigQuery? You could see that, all right, well, there is some weather data from NOAA going back to 1929 and a bunch of other publicly available data sets. Because you might say, all right, Evan, I don't have a data set that I can play around with. Do you have example queries or do you have example data that I can just get a feel for what are some of the different things that I can do with SQL, and what are the different types of things that I can do with the data sources and data sets that are out there. So not only can you query, but you can also explore some of the really cool data that's available publicly, both here inside the BigQuery UI, and there's a great team that manages the BigQuery public datasets. If you just Google BigQuery public datasets, and we'll drop the link into the bottom, you can see a lot of really cool datasets that you can play around with. All right, so BigQuery, again, you can ingest data, you query it live really fast with inside of SQL that you write. You're going to learn more about what are the different types of advanced SQL that you can do inside of BigQuery inside of the course. And of course, you can run your queries, save the results, store the results. All right, and as you see here, the results, we have English for the Google page that has, let me do my counting here, 9 million views for the English page. We have the Spanish page there for the second result there. And you can imagine that if you wanted to change any part of your query, you just adjust the query here, and you can return the new results there as well. That's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to BigQuery. You can re-execute queries. One of the things that I like to do almost as a trick for the students in the course is if I re-ran it, do you think it'll run faster or slower or the same speed? A lot of people will say, oh, it's the same, right? Well, the good news about BigQuery is it'll actually store your results cached behind the scenes where it can. And this query, for example, took 3 seconds cached, and it didn't query 416 gigabytes of data because it had already done that. So it's a little bit of intelligence that's built in behind the scenes inside the architecture. I could go on and talk length about BigQuery, but one of the biggest things here is that this Wikipedia data was already loaded and, more importantly, already cleaned and cleansed. Now, I guarantee you the data that you have inside of your organizations is probably not only siloed in different departments, but is also unclean. So say the act of preparing your data, converting dates to the right date format, truncating fields, that's often a pain to do, especially by hand or even sometimes with SQL. And we're going to see next what a better way to cleanse and explore that data is.
All right, switching back to the slides. So, Cloud Dataprep. As Evan just mentioned, to be able to do valuable analytics or machine learning algorithms, you need to have data that it's in a clean state. You need that data to conform to some integrity rules. For example, the data has to be valid. One example is that numbers have to fall within the expected range. Dates have to be properly formatted. Another example is about completeness. You want to make sure that you have all the data that you need. If there are some missing values, you have to be able to deal with that and maybe fetch the proper information to complete that data. Uniformity is also an important rule. You want to make sure that, for example, numbers are in the right unit so that you can do proper calculations. However, yes, it is true that in the real world, it's very rare that you are handed a clean data set to begin with. So that's why you have to do some transformation on that data to make it cleaner so that then you can do proper analytics or machine learning work with it. So this is where Cloud Dataprep comes in. Cloud Dataprep is Google's self-service data wrangling tool. Data wrangling being the process of taking data in its native format and then making it usable for analysis. Dataprep is a UI-based tool. There is no need to write any code, and it's very easy to use. So this is what I'm going to show you now in a demo. OK, so what you can see here on the screen is a data set which I've just loaded in Cloud Dataprep. It is a data set of about 1 million records of fake credit card transactions. Those are fake just for the purpose of this demo. And so I'm going to walk you through the interface. You can see here all of the rows, all of the records, and you can also see all of the fields displayed on the screen. Let's take a look at the submission date on the left, which is where the times when the date and times when the transactions were made. It looks like if you look at the histogram, which show at what point in time those transactions were made, you can see 2 spikes there. So that looks interesting. Something you can do is to look in the details here, in the column details, to take a closer look. And yes, indeed, you can see that there are some 2 spikes here, 2 moments in time. I don't know, maybe there was some marketing campaign that happened. That's just, we already starting to get some insight here. It's something that might want to look into further later on. You can see also Dataprep shows you more information, like for example, which day of the week the data was recorded or which month of the year. So as you can see, you can drill down into each column and then get some more details about that data. Let's take a look at the transaction amount column here. What you can see here at the top is what is called the data quality bar. It gives you some information about the quality of that particular column. Here you can see in particular there's a dark gray stripe. That means that there are some missing values for some of the records. If I click on this, you will see that it actually highlights all of the records that have a missing value.
That's cool.
Something we can do, maybe we can decide that for the purpose of our analytics work, we want to remove all those records. And that's very easy to do here in the right. You can just select here add for the delete rows transformation. And that's going to automatically remove all of the rows that have missing value. And you can see now the dark stripe is gone. So for transaction amount, we're expecting to see some decimal values. So this is why I'm going to change the type. And now that we change the type, you can see that there is a red bar. This means that some values are mismatched or misformatted. Let's take a closer look. I'm clicking on that, and that highlights all of the incorrect or mismatched values. Incorrect here. There is also the dollar amount right there. So to be able to do some calculation on those numbers, we will need to remove those characters. And there again, this is something we can do here by selecting a transformation. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace.
And these are just suggestions that automatically came up?
Yeah, these are just suggestions. It will offer you a few suggestions of operation that we typically do based on the type of the column that you've selected. So here I've selected the replace transformation. And here, there's also something that's really cool is that you can preview the effect of your transformation in that yellow column that just appeared. So you can see that here, yes, indeed, the USD character would be removed. However, we also need to tweak that transformation to also remove the $sign. So this is what I'm going to do here by clicking Edit. And here in the pattern that is matched, I'm going to select USD as well as the $sign. And there you have it. The $sign is also going to be removed. So now I can just add this step in the recipe. A recipe is basically a series of steps of transformation step that you want to apply to a data set. All right, so now we've cleaned up the transaction amount column. Let's move on and look at the transaction type. Transaction type column contains the type of the transaction. It could be a debit or credit or an authorization. Something that could be useful in some cases, for example, in machine learning, it's useful to create features that will extract the different types of the different values that are available in a particular column. It's also useful for doing aggregation calculation. So something we can do here is to split that column into 3 separate columns, one for each value. So this is what I just done here. Oh, sorry, just click the wrong thing. Try again. All right, structure, click, create a column for each unique value. And there again, you can see the preview of what's going to happen is going to insert a Boolean or a 1 or 0, 1 for each value. All right, moving on to the credit card number column.
I'm furiously writing all these down so I can, go online.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, so obviously that is pretty sensitive information. We might not want our data scientists to have access to the information.
Everyone's taking screenshots at home.
Exactly.
Right now.
Please don't. This is just a fake data set anyway, so you won't get anywhere with that. But yeah, so this is a case where data prep could be used to remove sensitive information. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new step in the recipe. I'm going to type replace to select the replace transformation step. Select the credit card column. And then for the pattern, I'm going to select the first 12 digits. And I'm going to say replace those digits with a few stars at the beginning. All right, so that way we ensure that nice. The credit card numbers are totally anonymized. All right, and then moving on to the email field, you see that there is another red stripe here. That means that some of the email addresses are misformatted. So something we might want our marketing team to take a look at that and maybe fix the issue. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new column with a flag, and that flag is going to be true for all of the values that are misformatted, and that way our marketing team can just follow up with our users and then try and fix and get the proper email address. And then finally, the location field. Here is the field that contains two information, the latitude and longitude. Those two information are concatenated in the same column. It might be useful for calculation purposes to split those two values. So this is also something I'm going to do here. I'm going to add a split step for the location column. And I'm going to split it at the using the semicolon character, which is the one that is used to separate those two values. So now that's going to create those two extra columns. And to make it easier to work with that, I'm going to rename those columns. The first one as latitude, and the second one as longitude. All right, so now that we've cleaned our data set, we basically worked on a sample. We want to apply that same recipe of transformations to the whole data set, to the million records that we have in our source data set. So this is where you're ready to run a job. When you run a job, it's going to use Dataflow behind the scene to run all of the same transformation step at scale for your entire data set. You have the option of outputting the clean data set either to cloud storage or to BigQuery. So by default, it's going to use a CSV file in cloud storage. So here I'm going to run the job, and it will take a few minutes to run.
This is on the entire data set now.
This is going to run on the entire data set, and you can see here the job is running. Something that you might also want to do is to schedule the same jobs to be run every hour or every minute for every interval that you want, if you expect to receive fresh data from time to time. So that was a quick demo of data prep, something that's very easy to use to do transformation on your data.
That's excellent. Thanks, Julian. I'm sure a lot of you folks, as you were watching the demo, had a lot of questions about, well, can it do this? What about this transformation? Don't forget, type in your questions into the box below. And again, we love these tools. They were just as exciting to us when they were first released as they are to a lot of you seeing them for the first time. So add those questions in. Try to stump the hosts here, and we'll answer those in the Q&A section. All right, last demo on the board while that job is running. Let's jump back into a little bit of machine learning. So I would say data prep is such a tough act to follow because I've been working with SQL for 10 years, and just seeing the ease of which you can do a lot of those transformations, and it handles the scheduling or like the workflow component. Even if you know a lot of SQL, a lot of you may be screaming, yes, finally, in the background too. So Cloud Dataprep is super fun to play along with. So the only thing that I could do to get the same level of enthusiasm for that one is introduce some of the cool things that you can do with what I call friendly machine learning. So friendly machine learning means if Google already has the machine learning APIs for things like text classification, redacting personal identifiable information automatically, and they've had these models already pre-trained, how can you get easy access to them? So that's what we're going to cover next. Before we do that, I just wanted to do a little bit of an exercise. Take a look at these two fruits. Even without machine learning, just think about heuristically, how would you classify them as one or the other? So a lot of you might be thinking, okay, well, obviously I know just with my human intuition, one on the left is an apple, one on the right's an orange. One of them's red, one of them's orange, well, orange. Let's classify them based on color. Not so easy. So now what happens if I gave you these images? Now, what happens if I added more fruit? As you see on the right, you have not only something that's spherical in shape-ish, a little bit oblong there, that mango is also multicolor. So when you're doing these hard-coded rules, or like imagine building a big decision tree of if this fruit is red, then this, or maybe even if it has like a stem, you get into a very, dare I say, like hard-coded fashion of a ton of rules. And that's maybe a little bit too much that you wanted to take on. Well, let's start with something easier. How would you classify, say, for example, the difference between this dog here and the mop? It's very easy to know the difference between a dog and a mop, right? That's going to be just like one of those 0 and 1 things. Well, not so much. It turns out there's a lot of dogs out there that look like mops. So this is just an example there. So even for humans, it's very hard to just sometimes something that might seem like an easy classification task gets you quickly into hot water. And the good news is with machine learning, the machines can pick up, and they don't learn these hard-coded rules. So machine learning is all about replacing these hard-coded rules or heuristic rules with learned knowledge from historical patterns that they've seen. So with Google Photos, for example, you feed in a ton of images of dogs and a ton of images of mops. When I say ton, like millions of records, billions of records of these images. And then the algorithms, the machine learning models get smart enough to then classify this as, say, 99% sure that this is a dog and not a mop. So the ultimate question there is, how do you get access to these friendly machine learning models where the training's already been done? You can use those 5 and that's just the tip of the iceberg for some of the pre-trained ML APIs. Those 5 there on the right, and those are what we're going to demo. Or if you're saying, well, there's not really a pre-trained ML API for my use case, that's when you would use something like TensorFlow or the Cloud Machine Learning Engine to write your own model code and then train your own models. But again, the training step for a model, and more importantly, getting that really rich historical data, is oftentimes one of the hardest efforts. And you can skip that step almost entirely by invoking or using some of what I'll call these friendly machine learning APIs. So let's look at each of them in turn, and then I'll show you a web browser demo where you can access them yourself, and I'll show you how you can actually use that programmatically. And begin to think about ways that in your jobs, maybe you might not be working with images, as you see here. This is just a simple classification of, I tried to trick the model a little bit with this camouflage owl. Obviously, it was able to pick that out pretty quickly. But say you have a lot of text. So say you had like customer reviews or product reviews, and you wanted to mine that for sentiment or syntax analysis, you can do that with the natural language API as well. So I'm just going to show you very quickly. You don't have to do this now, but if you're watching this video again, you could go to cloud.google.com/natural language, as you see there in the browser. And then you can say analyze. And this is the browser version where you just have text that's fed into there. And the pre-trained model behind the scenes looks for different entities. So it basically says, oh, Google, we think Google is an organization based on the text that you inputted here. Also, you're talking about Android and users, and this is about a customer electronics show for Google. And you can say, well, let's rate the sentiment analysis. Is it positive or negative? And you can say from 0 to 1, green being positive and closer to 1, and red being negative, closer to -1. I mean, this is a slightly positive sentiment. So Google in this particular case is announcing a new product. So naturally, the next question is, all right, well, you're showing me this inside of a web browser demo. How do I do that for my data without having to come back here and copy and paste all of that text at the same time? And that's where I'm going to introduce you to one of the last tools in the toolkit that's covered as part of the course, which is a data science notebook, or a Cloud Data Lab is the product, the notebook. So if you're familiar with IPython or Jupyter Notebooks, this is exactly, this is going to look familiar to you. So inside of Google, inside of Cloud Data Lab, what I have here is this ML APIs IPython notebook, and this is going to be one of the labs in the course that you're going to take. I'm actually going to reconnect. And what you see here is a lab that we've written for you. And inside a lab notebook are two different types of text that you're going to see. So if you're familiar with SQL, inside of BigQuery, just jumping over there very quickly, you'll see that it's pretty much all code. And then if you have a very friendly developer, you'll also have a little bit of comments that are thrown in there as well, if you're lucky. Inside of Cloud Data Lab notebooks, I like to say that it promotes code commenting to almost like an equal class as the actual code. So you have these cells that are code, and then you have the cells that are markdown, or pretty much anything that you would want to have, like text or links or something like that too. So it reads more like a story. So if you've ever worried about like looking at code and not understanding it, Cloud Data Lab notebooks will pretty much allow you to tell a cohesive story with one long notebook. So our goal here is to play around with a lot of machine learning APIs that are available. So what I'm going to do is I have an API key that's been authenticated. The 4 APIs that are part of this lab are listed here. I'm only just going to go through a few so you can get a familiarity with it. So those of you familiar with Google Translate, we're just going to invoke the Google Translate API with just a few lines of code here. And all of these labs and all of these demos are publicly available in the course repository. So what I'd highly encourage you to do, don't focus on memorizing and regurgitating verbatim the code that you see here. You can always start with this notebook as a template and then swap out where the data comes from to maybe your own data sources or play around with them yourself. So let's see. If I wanted to convert the data input, this is using this service. Is it really this easy or amazing technology or wow? I'm going to actually, you can just edit these. I'm going to say terrible, and then I can just run this particular code. And then you see this, just this section of code runs, model and then translate. And it'll come back with a translation based on the language inputs that we've set in, which in this particular case that we're sourcing it to English and hoping for the target end language in FR, which is French. I need to reset my session. Oh, perfect. Now that we're reconnected, I'm actually going to, sometimes to conserve resources, the Data Lab notebooks will pause just to make sure that they're not using resources behind the scenes. So sometimes what you might have to do is just reconnect the current notebook session. Let me just make sure that Cloud Data Lab. The Cloud Shell. All right. So in the interest of time, what I might do is we'll save this for a demo that I'm going to upload a little bit later because I have this a little bit pre-done. And what I might do is we're going to pause for questions that you have based on what you've seen so far. And while we pause, what I'm going to do is just restart this box, and then we'll do the demo just quickly after the sessions. So if you haven't finished, type in the questions that you want answered there, and then what we'll do is we'll come back after a minute, and then I'll fix this, and we'll get you up and running with some very easy and friendly machine learning. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We have a lot of awesome questions that we can't wait to answer. But to almost vindicate myself, I'm going to do a quick demo. What had happened is my machine decided to go to sleep behind the scenes.
This happens.
Yeah, so I love doing it during a live demo. But I'm going to get you a little bit of familiarity with some of the translation. So let's see if we can't translate amazing technology with the technologies you see here. Is it really this easy? Is it really this hard? And let's translate that into French. We'll test our French here. Difficile, there you go. My French.
That's it, I can vouch.
You can vouch for it?
It's correct.
So the translation works. And then what I really like about these next few is we optically characterly recognize, I just made that up by the way. We OCR this image here and then extract the text and then translate it from different languages. So for these pre-trained ML models, you can layer them on top of each other as well.
Really cool.
So this is the Vision API where you run that. The image it's just serving from is in Google Cloud Storage, which you may already be familiar with. So you could have your own JPEG that you could switch into there. It's recognizing all the characters and parts of the text there. And then it prints out basically saying, hey, this is the language, this is the locale. And then, all right, use that as an input to then translate it. So a lot of the best machine learning models, like you've seen the ones where you just point your phone at say you're visiting overseas in China or something like that, where you're just pointing your phone at the sign, it actually uses multiple machine learning models behind the scenes. In this case, we translated to please love and respect hygiene to create a beautiful water environment there. Last but not least, very quickly, one of my favorite ones is we've ingested some poetry here, and we're looking at whether or not it's sentiment analysis positive or sentiment analysis negative, and the strong magnitude based on that. So this one is to succeed, you must have tremendous perseverance and tremendous willpower. So I'm expecting that one to be very high magnitude, which it is. The polarity is 1, which means it's very positive and very, very strongly positive. Whereas, let's say this last one, -1, when somebody you love dies and you're not expecting it, you don't lose her all at once, you lose her in pieces over time. So I'm getting sad thinking about that. That's -1, and that's a decently strong 0.4 magnitude. And again, these are just these pre-canned examples that we have here just by running these notebook cells. Use these labs when you take the course. And I would say feel free to edit this at your leisure, add in your own text, connect to your own data sources, because as I like to say, good artists copy, great artists steal. So steal with pride when you see these demos and a lot of the pre-canned code that we have. All right, we have about 5 more minutes, and we definitely want to answer a lot of the questions that you've been asking. If you have questions additionally for this machine learning stuff that you didn't get a chance to ask and type in, be sure this video will persist for folks that want to watch it later. Add your questions even after our talk. All right, we're going to jump into the Q&A. All right, let's see if they've stumped us. First question, would the result set and cache inside of BigQuery automatically get invalidated if the dataset changes? Somebody's definitely played with BigQuery, and that's absolutely true. So cache is invalidated anytime the underlying data changes. And the cool thing is there's a lot of metadata associated with your tables inside of BigQuery, where you can actually look to see when the table was last updated or last modified. And you can actually query that particular metadata as well. I can speak more at length. Take the course. We go into some pretty cool performance characteristics in cache. Let's see. You want to take the next one?
Yeah, I guess I could take that. Can you record these transformation suggestions desired to be able to apply to subsequent sets of data? Yes, the answer is yes. You can. Those steps are recorded in the recipe, and you can apply the same steps to whatever data set that you want.
Yeah, it's super useful if you're collaborating with other people. You can actually commit your recipe to like version control or something like that, and basically have recorded versions of recipes as the recipes evolve themselves over time. All right, do you want to take the data prep one?
Quick question for data prep. We have data persisted in multiple tables. Can data prep run on top of a BigQuery so that we can pull data from across different tables? The answer is yes. You can not only pull data from BigQuery, but also from multiple tables. You can mix and match data coming either from cloud storage and BigQuery, and you can join those data sets together. So yeah, the answer is absolutely yes.
All right. When data arrives periodically, can you automate such data wrangling programmatically instead of the UI? So you have potentially a data engineer here.
Yeah, so data prep is a UI-driven tool. if the transformations available in Dataprep are only enough for the purposes of your the work you have to do on your dataset, then this is where you want to use Dataflow instead. Dataflow is the backend behind Dataprep, which allows you to write down code that's a much lower level, but you also have much more control to write very specific transformations. So yeah, the answer is that if those transformations are very specific, you would want to use Dataflow instead.
Great. How long does a data prep job usually take?
It depends on the size of the dataset, the complexity of the recipe, and the transformation. The job that I just ran earlier took about 10 minutes. So just to give you an idea.
Great. When would you use, I think you answered this in part, data prep versus using something like Dataflow?
So Dataprep I would use for exploration purposes, because you already start getting some visual insights about your data. You can play around, you can preview the effect of your transformations, and sometimes it's actually enough to do simple transformation. And again, if you have more complex, more specific or granular transformation you want to do, then this is where you want to use Dataflow.
Cool. Last but not least, what are the performance considerations for BigQuery datasets? So we have entire module of the course dedicated to making your queries high performance and making your datasets high performance. But just off the top of my head, anytime you're doing transformations, make sure you're only using the data that you actually want to transform. That means if you can filter your data with like a where clause early and filter often. Also, if you're a beginner to intermediate SQL, there's some really advanced SQL concepts that we go through in detail inside the course, like unnesting or nesting data, where you can actually have a table that has inside of it to drill down records. So if you have a customer and you have all the orders associated with them, normal relational database schema would say separate the two, but inside a BigQuery you can actually store parent-child records within the same table, and you get the performance benefits of automatically pre-joining the tables without having to do like an expensive SQL join operation. If that went way over your head, take the course. There's a lot of really, really good topics on performance. We go into data prep in a lot more detail. And yeah, I think you'll honestly have a blast. I think we have a few more links to show just for folks who are interested in grabbing the... So this is the final slide that we'll just show for you all. So this is to access Coursera courses. This is to take those quick labs, which are like those labs that you saw us going through in those notebooks automatically. And last but not least, if you wanted to see what all the other courses that are available, that last link is there. But the good news is, this is just the start of your webinar series today. So although we kicked it off today with just 3 of the different tools, be sure to stay tuned for the next session, which is Cloud ML Engine 101. And we're going to put you over live to Kirkland. See you guys later. Nice job.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.